Okay, so in order to install our cowl, we're going to have our spinner ready. Let's prepare our spinner. This is the 40mm Elite spinner, and it comes with a hardware pack. Inside the hardware pack, you'll find some spare screws, and you'll also find a couple of aluminum rings. The aluminum rings are spacers. One of them, the larger one, is the correct spacer for most of the brushless motors that we'll be using on this aircraft, including the Omega. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the correct aluminum spacer, and you can tell it's the right one because it slides over the prop shaft, the perfect size, and we're going to press it into the back of the spinner. And we'll use the table and we'll press that in. Okay, the spinner back plate is now prepared. It'll slide on. Okay, so now we can go ahead and mount the cowl. We'll be using the spinner in that process. So, for mounting the cowl, we'll be using quite a bit of masking tape. Okay, we're going to be cutting some strips, and we're going to be using it to hold things in place. So we're going to start by taking the masking tape, and I'm going to cut some 1/4-inch wide strips out of it. Okay, so we've cut our little strips of masking tape, and what we're going to use the masking tape for is we're going to use it to indicate the locations of the 4 little plywood squares that are mounted here on the fuselage side, right at the F1 former. And you can see them there inside. It's a little bit difficult to see on camera, but you can see the little plywood squares. The rest of the fuselage side is lightweight balsa wood. The little plywood squares are there to hold the cowl screws. This is where the cowl is going to screw into the plywood. So what we're going to do with these strips of masking tape is we're going to use them as indicators to show where these plywood squares are. So what we do is we take them, we find the little plywood square, make sure we know exactly where it is, and we use the tape as an indicator of where the square is. Okay? Then we take the front edge of the tape and we peel it back about 1 inch. What we'll do when we place the cowl on here and we get it located, we'll push these back forward and we know where to drill the cowl. So, peel these back on both sides. Okay. Alright. Now, in working on the cowl, we have to have the canopy hatch installed. If we don't have the canopy hatch installed, the cowl's never going to fit right. So we start by installing the hatch. Okay, before we install the cowl, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to take a strip of masking tape about 3/4 of an inch wide. I'm going to stick it on the front top of the canopy hatch, and this is going to provide a little extra clearance when we install the cowl so that later it'll be a little easier to get the canopy hatch on and off the aircraft. Alright, so we have that. We're going to place the cowl on the front of the airplane, and now we need to make our cowl straight. It needs to be perfectly straight. The way we do that is we go ahead and install all the pieces on the front of the aircraft. The spinner back plate for our 40mm spinner, our prop, our prop washer, and our prop nut. And since we're just using this to locate the cowl, we don't have to torque these down. We just have to hand tighten them, and then we'll install the spinner cone on the front. We'll go ahead and put the spinner cone screws in, tighten those down. Okay, so now we have all these pieces together. Now what we can do is we can use this to locate the cowl. What we want is we want a small gap, about 1/16 of an inch, between the front of the cowl and the back of the spinner plate. And we want everything to be lined up straight. Then we can take a piece of our masking tape and use it to hold everything exactly straight between the cowl and the spinner. Okay? can take our pieces of tape we made earlier, roll them back forward, and we know exactly where our little plywood squares are. So we can then make our holes for our cowling screws. Now, if you have a set of very small drill bits, you can drill these holes here in the cowl. If you don't own a set of drill bits, here's an easy way to make these holes. Take a good sharp X-Acto knife, go right here to the end of the tape, and just rotate it back and forth. X-Acto knife drills fiberglass really easily. Okay, we'll do it for the top and the bottom hole. Okay. Now we can peel this tape back a little bit. We're going to be using these little screws that come in your kit as our cowl screws. And we'll screw the cowl screws in. Okay, and now we're going to repeat this on the other side. Okay, now we have all 4 cowl screws in, so we can remove all of our tape. So there's the front end of the airplane. Cowl is installed straight to the spinner. We used a piece of masking tape between the canopy and the cowl to give us a little extra space so that it'll be a little bit easier to install and remove the canopy hatch. The reason we did that is the canopy hatch is tight at first. The fit under the cowl is always going to be tight on a new aircraft, and it may take a little wiggling to get it in or get it out. So the first couple of times that you install the canopy hatch, take your thumb, help it in there a little bit, wiggle it a little bit. Okay? And then after several flights, this will start to loosen up over the life of the airplane. If we don't start with a tight fit at the beginning, it might be too loose by the time the airplane has had a lot of flights on it. So we like it to be a nice tight fit here at the beginning of the airplane's life. I'll show you one other thing about the canopy hatch. So this edge has the racing canopy, which means the area where the latch engages the cockpit here is hidden underneath paint. So what you need to do before flight every time, you need to check and make sure that your latch is fully engaged. This should be fully forward. Okay? If you take off like this with the latch in the halfway position, this pin's not fully engaged. So make sure that you have this pressed down and make sure you engage the latch fully before you take off. Alright, so we're done fitting the cowl. Since we are going to be working on the radio with the battery plugged in some more, we're going to go ahead and remove the prop. We don't want to leave our prop installed when we're doing our radio setup. It's too easy to reverse the throttle channel accidentally or have some other accident and have the airplane go taking off across the room.